but I'll let the Grand Poobah start us off.
He will start us off. Good morning, Bucknutters. A little behind the scenes there. It is Tuesday, December 23rd, 2025. We are in holiday season. And if you don't believe me, just listen for cranky teenagers and dogs. And I think there's deliveries. So I am not in charge during the holidays. It's running rampant over here. But I've got my guys here, Garrick, Hodge, and Mark Porter. And we have a show for you today. We're going to obviously talk about the impending matchup with Miami. These guys have yet to check in since we learned Ohio State's opponent. And then we are actually going to take a look at Cincere Johnson. Mark has some tremendous video, original exclusive video from their playoff run. And of course, Cincere is the latest in the Glenville pipeline and looks a little bit like someone who has pipelined his way to massive draft capital, and that is Arvell Reese. But we start with the task at hand, and that is the Canes. I asked our guys to take a quick look at them at least to get a vibe on how they match up. Mark, you've been doing Buckeye in the Sky and breaking down film for the entire season for several years now. When you saw the matchup with Miami, what jumped out to you?
Well, I did a chat last week, and I got a lot of questions, and when I wrote about Miami, I said they were the scariest team, and there weren't a lot of people picking them to win. It seemed to be an A&M crowd, or the consensus was A&M was going to win. Don't worry about it. But what happened is, it was a low-scoring game, but the playmakers from that team, Miami, they're real, and we're going to have to put a roof on those guys, and they are scary. Mark Fletcher, the running back, that had a great game last week. He's the workhorse. Tony and the young freshman receiver, those guys, we got to know where they're at all the time. They could catch any pass, slip a tackle, and be off to the races. That scares me in a big game like this. Not that we haven't seen playmakers before. Carson Beck, I know there's a lot of people that think he's overrated, or they don't think he's that great, or he's a game manager. He worries me that he's got 6 years of experience. I think I saw a list of guys that are in the NFL in their third year right now that came in the same freshman year as him. They're on their second contract in the NFL, and this guy's still throwing it around college. So he may not be the most talented or most well-liked guys, but he could win you a game, and there's a reason they brought him in. And with those playmakers, anybody can throw the bubbles, hitches, and slants and get lucky there. So he kind of worries me. I'm sure people know about Ruben Bain, the defensive end. He seems to be the number one draft pick, or one of the most highly touted, NFL guys coming out of Miami. So, can our tackles hold up against him in pass protection? We've had a clean pocket for Julian all year, where, he rarely gets any type of even footprints near him. We might see some people zipping by the tower, like in Top Gun. We may see Maverick come by him a few times. So I'd be watching for that. But overall, I think we're a better team. I think we take care of business, but I think some of these playmakers make some big plays. I don't know if you can hold down all of them, this late in the year when everyone's got their polish to them. So I'm trying not to be Debbie Downer there, but that's what scared me a week ago. So I got to be true to myself. And, the same thing that scared me last week against A&M, the same thing that scares me for the Buckeyes.
Garrick, your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is a little bit of a fun fact that Miami currently has 3 former Ohio State commits on their roster, and that's Mark Fletcher, as Mark already talked about, the running back, their leading rusher. That's Justin Scott, who's their starting defensive tackle and has performed very well this far. Has about a grade of around, I think, 76 on Pro Football Focus, which I know some people love PFF, some people hate it. I'm in the I love it category because I think it's a pretty good look into how successful a player is on any given play. And then the third one doesn't really factor into this matchup a whole lot. That's Jordan Lyle, the former running back. He's a very infrequent ball carrier for the Hurricanes. But when I look at Miami, I look at a team that is incredibly stout on defense and can be explosive on offense, but has a lot of kinks and flaws offensively, especially when you're factoring in that they're going against Ohio State, arguably, and not really arguably, the best defense in the country. So my main takeaway is that I think Phillip Daniels and Austin Searveld have their work cut out for them because Miami has a very deadly pass rushing attack from the outside. With Ruben Bain that Mark talked about, he has 7.5 sacks on the year and had 3 sacks by himself against Texas A&M last week. So he completely disrupted Marcel Reed and took over that game. And then another pass rusher, Akeem Mesidor, had a sack and a half last week and generated 11 total quarterback pressures, and he has 8.5 sacks on the season. So when you factor in those two guys on the outside, Phillip Daniels and Austin Searveld have to be on point and bring it. And I think they will. But this is arguably the best edge rushing tandem Ohio State has seen all year. I'm also impressed, looking a little further into things, coming into the season, basically everybody said that Miami's secondary is going to be its biggest weakness of the team by far. Well, it hasn't really turned out that way. They have the 4th highest rated cornerback in the country per Pro Football Focus in Keontae Scott, who has an overall grade, Dan, get this, of 90.5, which that is elite numbers right there. He shuts down one half of the field most games, and their other 2 cornerbacks are Xavier Lucas and Damari Brown, and those guys have a grade somewhere around 76. But their safety tandem is also incredible. They have Bryce Fitzgerald, a safety with 6 interceptions and a Pro Football Focus grade of 81.1, and Jacoby Thomas, who has 4 interceptions and a Pro Football Focus grade of 84. Now, having said that, they haven't necessarily been challenged by a wide receiver core that they're going to see against Ohio State with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. So we're about to find out how good these defensive backs are. But I don't want to be accused of glazing Miami too much, because one way I would attack them is their leading tackler is Muhammad Toure, a linebacker. He's a decent run defender and a decent pass rusher. But I will say, if you can find him in coverage, especially against Matt Sclair or, heaven forbid, a wide receiver, attack that man, because he has not done well in pass coverage situations this season. So that is who I would be looking, especially now since Ryan Day is probably going to be the primary play caller. That's who I would be looking to exploit when given the opportunity. And then offensively, I'll keep this one much shorter. Malachi Tony, you don't need to know a whole lot. He has 89 receptions on the year for almost 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's a threat to house it anytime he touches the ball. He's explosive. Ohio State was very interested in him for many reasons on the recruiting trail, and you can see why, and that's turning out. I don't want to go on a tangent about Carson Beck because I do agree with Mark to an extent that you can't teach experience, you can't teach know-how. But I also say most times Carson Beck has faced an elite defense, even going back to last week. It does not go very well. Now, the one thing I can give Carson Beck credit for last week is that he didn't do anything to muck it up and lose it. He threw 20 pass attempts, around 103 yards, but the biggest stat there is no turnovers, because normally the book on Carson Beck is if you get pressure on that guy, he's going to give you the ball. So if I'm Ohio State and Matt Patricia, I'm doing everything I can to make this guy feel uncomfortable, to make him feel rushed, to speed up his internal clock, because this guy has a tendency to give the ball away. And that's showcased in his 10 turnovers so far this year. Not even 10 turnovers, 10 interceptions. And the other thing that I think this will ultimately come down to is coaching. That's a tremendous edge to Ohio State. And hey, I'll give Mario credit. He won a close big game last week, and normally he turns into a pumpkin in these situations with a terrible clock management situation. Still, I can't get over what happened 2 years ago, that he lost a game 135 out of 136 FBS coaches would make, when all he needed to do was take a knee, and instead he called for a running play and the running back fumbled, and the rest is history. But I maintain that Mario is worse than James Franklin in game management situations, which will make Ohio State fans very happy to hear. So if we find ourselves in a very close game in the Cotton Bowl and it's teetering down to 3 minutes, it's a 1-possession game, keep an eye on Mario Cristobal to see how he calls this game, how he manages it, to see just how much he's learned. Because I'm not convinced that he's not going to turn back into a pumpkin if given the chance. And with that, I turn it back over to Dan.
Great stuff from both you guys. I wonder, I mean, I really do hate to oversimplify things, and I kind of said this with Dave yesterday, but with these two teams, how they're built and how they've played, if after this game you can tell me which offensive line played better, I think you're going to know who won the game. I hate to see it. Really does feel like an oversimplification. It's kind of like saying whoever wins the turnover battle will have the advantage. I get that, and your offensive line has to play well, but Beck's numbers, as Garrick referred to, he is literally Jekyll and Hyde when you talk about pressure and a clean pocket. And Miami has protected him as well as any guy has been protected all year. But if you do get to him, he literally half his numbers. I mean, he goes from about an 80% guy to a 40% guy. And I just have real confidence that Matt Patricia is going to be able to confuse him consistently. Keep in mind, we did not have to play a game before this, so they got to go deep in the lab on all these guys. And then the past few days, I'm sure, cranked it up on Miami. So I'm actually pretty confident about this. And, we mentioned Mark Fletcher, who I think that will be kind of the dramatic side of the game because we've lost guys in recruiting. That was one that really bothered people at the time. Tony Alford, when he was coach here, took a lot of guff from the people. And as you look at Ohio State's roster now, they could use Mark Fletcher. There's no question about that he's probably a better player than C.J. Donaldson at this point. I mean, you can't unravel things that way and expect them to be that linear, but that's going to be an interesting one. And the only other thing I will say is they're a little bit top heavy. They don't have the depth that Ohio State does, even at running back or receiver or tight end. So I think I'm pretty confident Ohio State's going to do a great job in this game. Your PFF guys, the guy I like at PFF said Ohio State 27-10. I'm not ready to say that, but there are people who don't think Ohio State will have as much trouble with Miami as maybe we do, which is okay. We're probably a little sensitive around here. Let's ask this question. Do you guys think our offensive line will be ready, particularly the right side? This is kind of getting back to what we're talking about here. Now, we do know now that Gabe Van Sickle will be the right guard, not Tegra. Either you guys have a strong feeling about that? Do you think how much do we think Philip Daniels' struggles may have been from the fact that he was trying to cover from Tegra? Mark, what's your vibe on that?
Well, if we knew, the people wouldn't be asking the question, but I got this question in the chat. There's just not a big enough sample size to really say, hey, Bucknutters, sleep tight. We know. And I think that's what makes you so nervous is this isn't a defensive line that you want to bring uncharted territory into. Now, Gabe can handle it. I think he's a great football player. He's put good enough on tape, but it's a different test. It's going to be at a different speed for the whole team, let alone he's the single of the 22 starters. He's the single new guy that is kind of breaking in this machine, I think. I mean, pretty solid rotations all year, but he wasn't really a guy that we talked about playing against OU or anything like that. Like, we never had a spotlight on him. So it's basically through his practices and what the coaches have seen, in that setting that they said, this is our next man up. And we believe, but this question was around since I got my chat last week. I couldn't answer it really with any authoritative film study then. And I want to be able to say, hey guys, that right side, you won't see any leak throughs. You're not going to see any pressures. But you just don't know. So if you want to say there's a wild card, to be fair, that would be our only wild card of the 22 guys. We know who everybody else is.
We got a fun question in here. Where does Carson Beck rank among the remaining quarterbacks in the playoffs? So the 8 teams left, where would you rank him 1 through 8? Personally, I think I'm going 7. The only one I would take him over is Texas Tech's quarterback. I don't necessarily trust that guy. But outside of that, I mean, I would rather have Dante Moore. I'd rather have
Fernando Mendoza.
Sure. Yeah, I'd rather have Chambliss at Ole Miss.
Francisco or Fernando? I always get that.
Fernando. Yeah. I think he would be 7 out of 8 for me. I don't know about Mark. Mark will probably be like, oh, no. He's top 3, but just kidding. But
I'm not a Carson Beck guy. I'm not going to lie. I've said this before on here. I have a double standard. I just say it out loud about quarterbacks. There are certain things I expect out of a quarterback, like that I don't hold the same issue against another position. He just makes me uncomfortable. There's something about him. I'm not trying to be personal. He doesn't exude that confidence to me. I will say this: if you look at the stats, he gets rid of the ball as fast as anybody. He wants to get rid of it. He wants to have his back foot hit the ground and get rid of it. See, that's where I think Patricia comes in, because if he doesn't like that first look, he can panic and go from there. I think you're right, though. Let's just go through them. So you've got you'd rather have Alabama's quarterback Simpson. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yep.
Ole Miss, the Chambliss, the D2 transfer. I guess you could make an argument there. I'd rather have a guy with some better feet, like Chambliss, who's actually been really impressive if you watch them. Yeah. Maybe that's, a pumpkin situation. He's going to come back to earth, but he's been impressive. Obviously, Oregon's Dante Moore. There are a lot of people think he's got a chance to be, one of the top picks in the draft. So I think you're right on that.
I'd take him over Baron Morton, though, Texas Tech.
I have to admit, I have not seen a ton of Baron Morton. Texas Tech is that one team this year, just for me, that's kind of slipped through the cracks of my schedule, I guess. I haven't gotten a chance to deep dive on them. Who knows? Maybe we'll have to do that at some point. But I think you're on point there. And I really do think the extended break and the fact that everyone gets to rest up a little bit. I don't think you want to see Ohio State's receivers at full strength. There was a question yesterday, a bunch of press conferences yesterday, and yes, Day will be calling plays, but you also got to hear from Jeremiah Smith, who's been battling injury and now claims to be fully healthy. And when your best player or the best player in the game is fully healthy, and he hasn't been for a while, he may celebrate against the Canes. I also love the fact that it's a team from Florida and we're playing them in Texas. Anyone who thinks Miami is going to travel as well as Ohio State hasn't done their research.
They don't travel to their own stadium.
Kind of my point. So yes. Ohio State has, I think Jerry World will be an appealing destination for them. So we will check on that. All right. Will we be rusty? You guys want to take that? I'm not. I believe rest over rust. Mark, what's your coaching vibe on rest over rust?
I feel like this team needed a week of rest. Yeah. I just, for some reason, I don't usually like resting. I like keeping the momentum, but I think for whatever reason that was a long season, and I think this weekend to regroup after the Indiana game and to do the film study and really know this team, I think that all slides to our advantage. And that extra juice you get, you always see it when guys come off the bench this time of the year. Like, wow, when did he get so fast? That's called fresh legs. A lot of guys got a lot of miles on their legs right now, and they could use their dogs are barking, as they say. Their feet, just give those guys some time to kick their feet up and bring that juice back.
I can't completely discount it because if you remember, we don't have a whole lot of sample size to go off of, but literally every single team that had a bye last year lost. So maybe that's just a complete fluke situation, and then I think it will be. I don't think that's going to happen again. But I just know Oregon was crying about it for sure, that how long they were off. So I think that Ryan Day will have this team prepared, and that won't be an issue. And like Mark said, I think there were some players on that team that genuinely needed a couple weeks to reset, rest their legs, and get healthy. I mean, Jeremiah looked like a new man yesterday when he was talking about the time that he was given to recoup from his quad injury. And I think that could be a godsend to Ohio State. So maybe it just depends on the team. But if we're going off of the, albeit very small sample size, but history of the 12-team playoff, rest hasn't been a good thing for the teams that got to bye. So we'll have to see how this turns out.
Yeah, I think one trip through is too small of a sample size to think that the Oregon game from last year from Ohio State has any effect on this. And I'll say this again. If you've given Patricia extra time to break down and decipher and I will take him. I said to you guys on the text, Bryce Underwood came out and said, it's me versus Matt Patricia. Man, I want Carson Beck to say that publicly to get the karma working against him, because I will take my guy 100 times out of 100. Let's get to the good stuff, and that is Cincere Johnson. Now, we are in the process of getting all of this video out to you, and we will do this. Commitment evaluations. Got another one coming today for Legend Bay, who made it official, and we'll get to that. In fact, you know what? Let's do that real quick. That's my fault. Garrick, can you please update us on the latest from our guy, Legend Bay? I know we kind of all expected that. Yesterday you had the story. Let's wrap that one up before Dateline sets in to do a 3-part podcast on the whole deal.
Yeah, it's a quick update. It's a happy update. Legend Bay's paperwork has come in. He was granted his release from Tennessee about a week ago. And as of Monday evening, he is officially an Ohio State Buckeye. The paperwork has been turned in. He signed. I'm still not entirely sure how that works because I thought that he had to be 18 years old to officially sign it, and he turns 18 on Christmas Eve. So what I think, and this is just pure speculation, nothing confirmed here, but I think what might have happened is perhaps someone in his inner circle, perhaps his mother, finally relented and just turned in the letter and just tried to do Legend a solid at the end. That's what I hope would happen, and then everyone can just reset and start the healing process from this whole saga. But ultimately, the brass tacks of it is Legend Bay is going to be a Buckeye. He's going to be on campus sometime in January before classes start on the 12th. And Ohio State moves into the number 5 spot in 247 Sports' national recruiting class rankings. So assuming that holds, and granted, as a network, we have one more recruiting ranking update coming for the 2026 class in either late January or sometime in February, I believe. But assuming that holds, that will be the 7th straight year that Ohio State finishes with a top 5 recruiting class. So things are going pretty good, and I think more than anything, you can just take a deep sigh of relief. Legend Bay is where he wants to be. And I've always maintained, just from the start of us covering this story, it's not necessarily a happy ending because he's signing with Ohio State, although the Buckeyes aren't going to complain about that. But it's a happy ending because the kid ultimately is ending up where he wants to end up instead of where his inner circle wants him to end up. So now we can talk, when we talk about Legend Bay, we can talk about how he's going to impact the game as a dynamic punt returner and kick returner and a gadget player that's either going to thrive in the slot or in the backfield instead of, hey, by the way, have you heard the story of Legend's recruitment? That's the wildest one we've ever seen. But yes, it's a quick update. It's a happy update. And now we can, when we talk about Legend Bay and Mark does his evaluation, we can talk about how explosive of a playmaker he is compared to the drama that's unfolded in his recruitment.
And again, we'll have that video up later today. That was a wild one. He's going to be a cautionary tale. That's just how it works. We all know this. Landon Collins was, and he will be the next one now. So all's well that ends well. I apologize for the interruption there. Got kind of off kilter. Now we're back. We're going to talk about Cincere Johnson. Like I said, we'll eventually have videos for everybody up there. Your commitments, etc. Cincere, Mark, you've seen this guy and known about this guy for some time. Boy, it's so funny to me that if you just show me that picture X years ago, I would have said Arvell's looking big. But it's not. It's Cincere. So take it away.
Yeah, wearing the same number as Arvell, being coached by the same coach. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to think Arvell and Cincere are going to do the same type of damage when they get to college. I will say this. Cincere is, if you can see his waist right there, he's about as thin as he's ever been. So he's really down maybe 220, 225. I know he was close to maybe 240 at one time, and people started the defensive end rumors and will he be there? But you're going to see from this tape that he's versatile, and he can do that, but he really took to heart the inside linebacker, just like Arvell did. They improved their movement skills. You can see them in space when they break down on athletes. They really move like a running back more than a defensive end now. You can see the triggering ability. This is against Hoban in the playoffs. He's coming through a pretty good offensive line there on a blitz. Whether you blitz him or you play him in space, you can see him there, and then he triggers. And when he gets there, you could see these like dominoes fall. You know, he's a knockdown guy. Like the yardage is over the second he gets there. There's no like, I'm going to grab him and let him pull me a little bit. There's a striking ability. But yeah, in space here, you can see the way he turns and runs in pass coverage. that doesn't look like a defensive end. Now, this is what looks like Arvell.
Whoa,
the way he
dude.
came off and blew up the tackle. And I put these 4 clips in a row here coming off the edge just to get the Bucknuts excited because, yeah, he can do both. And he does look good coming off the edge. But his primarily role is inside. So let's not, get the cart in front of the horse here and say this is the next Arvell. He's got some work to do to be the next Arvell. But, boy, to have a little tape that kind of looks like what you need to look like, you can see that, yeah, he has those same traits.
I got to go back to the rankings, and I'll do that. But I think, please don't misinterpret what I'm about to say. I think Cincere has a higher ranking than Arvell did, at least coming out of high school. Now, keep in mind, Arvell had a little bit of a different experience. He spent, I believe, his first 3 seasons at Euclid and transferred to Glenville as a senior. So even though he was a known commodity, there was a little bit of an adjustment phase going from Euclid to Glenville, et cetera. Go ahead, Garrick.
Just providing context to Dan's point, he is absolutely correct. Arvell, as a high school prospect by 247 Sports, was rated the 206th prospect in the country, where Cincere Johnson is rated the 40th prospect in the country.
Cincere was also a Mr. Football finalist as a middle linebacker, which that's a running back quarterback award. And he was also Max Prep's Player of the Year. So decorated for sure. And some of it may be because of the trail that Arvell blazed.
I was going to say that probably doesn't hurt.
It's real easy to sell like, hey, we have the next Arvell. Oh, really? Well, we know how good he is. And if you say that, so those two kind of work tandem there to help Cincere pick up some nice awards here. But well-deserved and certainly a great senior year. When I saw him, he was playing Grady Kinsey, and that was Mr. Football in Ohio, the running back from Indian Valley. And that kid ran like a ton of bricks all night. And I tell you what, that Glenville defense had their hands full, and Cincere did a great job of – they were up 22-0, but then there was a comeback, and you could see that defense was tested. But I've really enjoyed covering that kid and watching him over the last couple of years because his brother was Freddie Johnson, who was like a 320-pounder. And everybody thought this kid was headed just like his brother. And he's done a great job of leaning out and being, an athletic player and not turning into a defensive tackle.
Also, now, you guys can disagree with me, but in the current climate, and that is a very finite statement in that the rules are changing all the time. The portal changes all the time. But in this current climate, if it stayed the way it does right now, I do think Ohio State and LSU have an advantage over a lot of the programs in that the great players in the state of Louisiana and the great players in the state of Ohio simply grow up expected to play for the home state team. In Alabama, there's a competition with Auburn. Florida has 100 schools and everyone recruits there. Texas and California, the same. But if you take the pipelines they have, now I'm going to get to the Glenville part here. We have built-in advantages here. Ohio State produces a ton of offensive linemen. We've seen Tyler Bowen go after them. The Glenville pipeline is solid gold. That is to have a place that is going to get you these excellent top-level players every year almost becomes a real advantage. And there's a loyalty factor, I think, at Glenville. Mark, you could speak to this, where they really do feel like their best players, I'm not saying should go to Ohio State, but they certainly do seem to end up there. And there's no reticence with the home team or anything like that. They built the pipeline. Now look what they've done with Arvell, too, at Ohio State. So if you're Glenville, why wouldn't you want to send him there? But Mark, am I hamming up the pipeline at all? Because I really see it as, as everyone's gotten more focused down in recruiting, I don't think you're going to be able to anymore. This is kind of an abstract. So everyone's got salary caps now. So we never used to lose anybody that we offered in the state. We lost Trey McNutt for, was it financial reasons? But you slot that safety spot, we are going to get someone who can fit in that slot. I don't know if I'm going to get the number 2 guy. But when you have the pipeline and it's that consistent, to me, that gives you an extreme advantage. Mark, am I overdoing the pipeline?
Not even a little bit. Where's the school in Michigan that Michigan always taps into and gets 2 or 3 big-time guys a year? Where's the school in Pennsylvania that Pennsylvania taps into every year that you're like, wow, they just always go back to that well and find another one? Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky. Where are those schools? Okay, so just in the schools around us. But in Florida, there may be a couple. St. Thomas down there, but do they have a loyalty to a certain program? Out Mater Dei out in California, we just took a couple of their players. So yeah, Glenville from that perspective certainly unique. But then, as you were talking about, I'm like, why does that work? And here's kind of there's two ways to answer it. The Catholic schools, like in Notre Dame, they said to me 20 years ago that if we just rely on the Catholic schools in Ohio to do their job, and what does that mean? That means Cardinal Mooney here in town or Ursuline here in town or our Catholic schools, that they get the best players in the area from the youth levels and get them to their Catholic schools and their feeder schools. And then those best players end up at the high schools. And then that means the public schools in the area don't have the best players. So if you're a Catholic school, you just had to recruit the Catholic schools. And if they did their job recruiting the 7th and 8th grades, they would do the job for you. Very similarly, Glenville is located in a part of the city in Glenville over on that east side where if they can just keep those city kids that live around their high school involved in sports, in the youth track programs, and Ginn has the Ginn Academy with his son running the track program, and the youth football programs in that area are all, I don't want to say not funded by the Ginn Academy or whatever, but they're parented and watched, and those coaches nourish those programs so that they do their job and keep those kids from that city and that east side in their neighborhoods, that they're going to have some of the best athletes in all of Cleveland, and not the west side. You're not going to be able to attract west siders over there, but they keep those kids home now, and they don't get picked off by St. Ed's or Menor or St. Ignatius. Those guys are picking kids off from the suburbs and, south and, other places in the city. I know I'm really getting deep into this, but it's a really a neat thing that if you want the best players from that east side of Cleveland, Glenville is going to be your hotbed. And to Ted Ginn's credit, from being the janitor at that school to taking it over and building this from the ground up, from the trust. And this wouldn't be going for 30 years if he wasn't one of the most trusted guys around youths and what he does and the way he raises kids. I was there one day at the Ginn Academy, and he sent a kid home for not having a belt. Can't come to work without a belt. And the mom was red hot that she had to come drop off the belt, but there's a standard there that he's installing for these kids where at a young age, they're being taught this is the way of the world. This is the workforce and what you're going into, and we're going to prepare you for it and treat you like a young man. And I know I went to a big digression on this, but Dan, you are not overstating what this. I mean,
no, that was
Glenville. I mean, there's been documentaries, and there are so many things there that make it, but that's why it works. They keep it home, the players on the west side, and make it a fun place to stay. Like, we're not leaving. Why would we ever leave? Glenville is, the place, and they make it cool and they make it fun. And the branding of it is also like cool and fun. It's like an NFL branding done there. So yeah, hats off to those guys. And let's hopefully in this NIL state that, money doesn't become a factor and players are being bought out of there that would traditionally stay home for Ohio State.
I have faith in Ted Ginn and the way they run things there. Those guys they can see the long term. Look, it's not just the hit rate we have on the guys from there is so high. I can't remember. I'm sure I could do it. The pipeline is just fantastic. All right, Garrick, finish with this. Chaz Coleman. Cooper Patagna of 24/7 Sports is ranking all of the transfers. So we have great transfer portal content on this. I'm telling you, the best you can find. You want a complete list? You want to break it down by player? You want to break it down by ranking? It's updated in real time. So if you are not using 24/7 Sports transfer content, you are not doing it right. It's the best there is. Now, Chaz Coleman definitely likes it because he's ranked as the #1 transfer guy. Now, that's not to be surprising. You're talking about a high-level prospect coming from a big-time school with several years of eligibility left. So that all feeds into it. Garrick, maybe your thoughts on what you've heard and what you think, and then Mark, any anecdotal stories you have about him leading crowds. You can go with that after that, and we'll finish up.
Well, it's always kind of a weird situation when we talk about the transfer portal because a ton of people have announced their intention to enter the transfer portal, but we always have to keep reminding ourselves that the portal doesn't actually open until January 2nd. So when they're always asking for updates, and yes, there's tampering that happens everywhere now in these days, and there's no college is stranger to that. But we can't really get anything official until January 2nd at the earliest, at least in terms of guys entering their names in the portal. Now, having said that, when Chaz Coleman announced his intention to enter the transfer portal, and he did so on his own social media account, I've heard there's going to be significant interest in adding a player of his caliber. I mean, you talk about a guy that could dominate as a defensive end, could stand up on the edge and pass rush that way. He is the top-ranked player in the transfer portal right now, but I think a lot of that is more based on potential than it is from actual production so far. Chaz Coleman set the world on fire for Penn State in the first couple games, and then once Big Ten play kind of hit, kind of tailed off a little bit, ran into the freshman wall, and then he was dealing with injuries the latter part of the year. But, I mean, you just talk about, and Mark's going to gush about him all that, a guy that was so versatile. He played all over the field at his high school, and just the raw athleticism off the charts. It's hard not to get excited. He's going to be one of, if not the best edge prospect that enters the transfer portal. Perhaps there could be ones more enticing, but this might be one of the better fits for Ohio State in a while. And yeah, do I think they'll be competitive? I sure think they will. Do I think it's a given he's going to Ohio State? No, I do not. But would I be surprised? But if I had to guess right now, does Chaz Coleman end up at Ohio State? Yeah, I would probably say he probably will. A lot has to happen, and by that I mean they have to find out what's going to happen with Kenyatta Jackson Jr. If he is heading out the door with Caden Curry, who's out of eligibility, then yeah, that probably amplifies the need for another great pass rusher even more. So Chaz Coleman becomes even more of that such of a priority. Now, I maintain that they could absolutely both bring back Kenyatta Jackson Jr. and add Chaz Coleman. I could completely see that happening. And so Too Long, Don't Read version is, yes, there's significant interest in Chaz Coleman. We're still a few weeks away from anything officially happening on that front in terms of visits, in terms of officially speaking to him, in terms of him even entering the transfer portal. But I will say that Matt Campbell at Penn State made it a priority to try to retain Chaz Campbell, and they were able to, or at least try to be competitive with their offer, and they weren't able to do it. He still announced his intention to enter the transfer portal, and he's going to see what his market's like. And I know there's a lot of connections to Ohio State, but when you're talking about the number one player in the transfer portal, there's going to be a lot of teams that have interest in that young man, and we'll probably make that very clear to him in the coming weeks. But of course, this is his home state. Ohio State has a lot of pull with him, even though they ultimately lost in his recruitment to Penn State. And we'll just see what happens. But I would guess this ultimately ends up in the favor of Ohio State, but long way to go. So I'll wrap up by saying I'm cautiously optimistic, but I don't think it's a certainty by any stretch of the imagination.
Mark, your thoughts on him in high school? You don't go too much in detail on that and how the recruitment finished up, and then bring us into the present day.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily a miss by Ohio State when he didn't sign with Ohio State. I think when he was coming out of high school, he was a quarterback that was fooling around on defense, and I think he was looked at as a developmental prospect. Like, hey, you come here, we'll give you a chance to develop here, but there was no like, we know for sure, that you're going to be the next, XYZ. So I think if they truly wanted him, they could have made a bigger play out of high school. But I think he was one of those guys at the end that we offer a scholarship to, and you saw that this year. You give a couple of guys a chance, and they maybe find greener pastures. Now, getting him to come over, this is going to be a funny money situation. The premier position, on a defense, getting to the passer, the money that's going to be thrown around for him, the relationship he could have with James Franklin or Matt Campbell. Those two are, curveballs into this whole thing. Ohio State needs Kenyatta. I saw Kenyatta Jackson projected in the first round. So to keep him around, you're going to have to pay him funny money, okay? Because first-round defensive ends aren't growing on trees, and if you have one in your backyard and you want to keep him, can you pay him more than he'll get at the end of the first round? I don't know. But if he leaves, all you're doing, and the same with Caden Curry, is freeing up two spots at both ends. Who are you paying at those ends then? Now you have a big hole in your roster where you had a huge budget set aside for a defensive end, because that's got to be one of the more highly budgeted spots. So if you lose both your defensive ends and you have that money available, I'd put it all towards Chaz Coleman. We can talk about how the Green Bay Packers got Micah Parsons, and did they or did they not win that because of the injury? But anytime you put funny money, don't talk about it. Anytime you put funny money on a player, you're risking that injury thing where, boy, if we put all of our eggs in one basket and this basket doesn't work out, are we in a lot of trouble? And I don't think Ohio State will ever do that with a single player. Even a Jeremiah Smith, that they're going to get paid fairly. They're going to get paid the top 2 or 3 at their position, but they're not going to go and set the market over and over again every year. Like, we always have the highest paid player. We're always going to pay our running back more than everybody else. No, we're going to find the people that want to be here, that want to be paid as a top player, but resetting the market is a bad business structure, and especially when you're in this new salary cap-esque era, how you're going to spend your money. So, all that being said, Chaz Coleman was at the Ursuline Warren Harding game last week, basketball game, leading on the student section, being a great, alumni to come back and fire up the crowd. I think he's enjoying his break around here. I'm seeing a lot of selfies with people and him on my Facebook feed and other places, and there's a lot of speculation with his people closest to him. I know some of the people in Warren, and they just have speculation right now. So Chaz is definitely guarded with what he's saying and, putting out there on the streets. Ohio State has the room. They should make a play. Funny money is the only thing to destroy this. And that's probably the way I'll go down.
I make no guarantees, but my expectation next year is that Kenyatta Jackson and Chaz Coleman are both on Ohio State. Kenyatta could have walked. He did not. This is a different era now. Go check out what the starting salary is for someone who gets picked in the second round versus what gets starting to pick at the first round of Ohio State defensive end starter. I had someone tell me they think Emeka was the only one who got a raise this year. So, not long-term maybe, but at least for year one. All right, we've gotten into the premium part of the show now, so you guys got to switch to C-SPAN for the rest. Just kidding. Appreciate these guys stopping by. We will not be back on Thursday. I can't even ask these guys to work on Christmas. Who knows? We may have some stuff going for you then, but keep it locked in, Nutters. Have a good one. Nutters of Buck.